Hello, everyone. I'm Avina Ajit, Research and Policy Analyst at AdviceUK. Today, I'm making this video to complement a report we published last week, which paints a picture of the advice sector. It talks about the state that it's in, the challenges advice services are facing, what their last 12 months have looked like, and what the future holds for them. They told us about their experiences through a survey that 188 members responded to. The survey ran between February 16th to April 20th. Geographically, that's 64% from England, 22% from Scotland, 4% from Wales, and 10% of organizations who have national coverage. Here you can see a further regional breakdown within England. In terms of the advice areas these organizations work in, it's genuinely reflective of our membership. Welfare benefits and housing are the two biggest topics, followed by money, debt, health, and asylum. One of the clearest signals in this year's survey is just how much our members are seeing the cost of living crisis play out in their day to day work. When we asked whether things had worsened for clients, a huge percent, almost 90%, said yes. That's the vast majority of respondents. Advisors told us housing costs are the main drivers, but you're welcome to pause the video here if you'd like to read some of these comments that advice services made directly to us. When we asked what was most affecting service delivery, three things came out clearly on top: funding shortages, increased demand, staff shortage, and retention. It wasn't just those three. Here you can see at the bottom, we have the tension between capacity and demand, almost the perfect storm where advice services are expected to do much more with much less, with a funding shortage and a huge increased demand from the cost of living crisis that clients are facing. So the cost of living crisis is not only bringing a lot more cases, but a deeper complexity of cases as well. Capacity pressures, this is where those pressures start to show up in real terms. 52% of members who responded to the survey told us that they had to turn clients away in the past 12 months because they simply didn't have the capacity. And when we asked why, the picture is pretty consistent with what we've already covered. 85% said increased demand for services, 51% said reduced funding, and 35% said staff absence or turnover. This is one of the numbers I think really lands, because when we see around 80% of advice staff are working some amount of unpaid overtime just to keep their services running. And breaking that down further, most of it is on the lighter end, occasional extra time or 1 to 2 extra hours per week. But then there's a meaningful group of about 11% combined working either half a day or more. But even with all that pressure, our members are still investing in the people wherever they can. We see 81% have taken up some type of in-house training and some amount of in-house training for staff in the last 12 months. What that tells us is, with resources and funding being at capacity, advice services are wanting to use informal knowledge sharing techniques to upskill and develop the staff and the workforce across the sector, but also within their organization. And when we asked advice services what their top policy ask for workforce development would be, it's small grants for staff development, possibly supporting all of these other workforce opportunities to develop their staff. And 59% said advice sector apprenticeships. This one is interesting, where we see a real appetite for apprenticeships, but there's no real uptake in the sector. We know that legal advice services possibly practice apprenticeships a bit more, but it's not widespread, and it is a gap that Advice UK is looking into. The last one, 50% said a joined up training and career pathway, which again spoke to us as the sector demanding and needing a less fragmented career system. This is one of the more pointed findings, and it was an area of inquiry of the survey where we really wanted to understand members' perspective on how much government values their advice services and what they think about that. Only 3.6% of members feel government fully understands the advice sector. The vast majority feel it's understood only partly or not well at all, and 17% said not at all. That disconnect matters because when we asked how prepared members feel to respond to policy changes or to adapt their services and delivery to policy changes, only 8% said extremely prepared. Most sit in slightly prepared, which tells us that the sector is having to absorb policy shifts without being equipped to respond to them. Some open comments from the survey really brought this to life. One member put it simply: government understands but doesn't act. Operational costs are rising, but funding from commissioners hasn't followed. Another member says government doesn't fully understand the depth of advice work or how crucial it is for communities. The themes that came through again consistently were undervaluation, underfunding, inconsistencies from government, but also a hostile environment for migrants and marginalized groups, unmet need outside of London, digital exclusion, and the burden of reporting requirements to funders. So, what are we going to do with all of this information? We're taking these findings to party conferences, using them throughout Advice Week, feeding them into further briefing and consultations that we write and respond to throughout this year. Because the goal isn't just to describe these pressures, it's to actually use them to influence policymakers and funders to support the sector in more effective ways. Thank you very much.